We are now recording.
And if the camera starts to, the picture starts to blur.
Oh, I think it's going to be fine.
No, you're fine. Yep.
Parkinson's.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Sorry. You can focus on, this is Jocelyn. I've met her outside.
We've worked together for a couple of years.
Well, that's great.
Makes life easier.
Yeah. And Jocelyn, I'm going to let Jocelyn take the reins.
So, you
Have him introduce himself.
okay? That's what I figured. You're gonna go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Mike Horton, a Marine Sergeant from Vietnam era. I had the pleasure of serving 2 tours, a total of 30 months, plus 32, I think. Depends on when you call getting out of Vietnam, or the Vietnam area, or the Vietnam conflict. Very much into terms. I have a long history of computer work, something like 50 years worth. And I got my computer education in the Marine Corps. Don't know where to go from here. Did JR warn you that I could talk forever?
He did not warn us.
No.
Okay, I'll talk to him about that. But Jocelyn knows me from before, so.
Yeah.
I mean, let's put it that way.
So how about we start with how old were you when you joined the military?
'66. 19.
And how,
19 and a half.
and how did your family feel about you joining the military?
Well, my 5th great grandfather, 4th great grandfather fought in the Revolutionary War. I have relatives, and they were officers and enlisted. I've got Civil War relatives on both sides, probably about 20 of them. My grandfather was a balloonist in World War I. My father was something in the World War II, and I can't find any records on him. And I have some suppositions of where he is from what information I can find. And my uncle fought in Korea, my cousins fought in Vietnam along with me. My family has grown up around the military. Mother didn't want me to go in the Marine Corps, Dad didn't care. And I didn't find, when I signed up and called my folks after being kicked out of college for 1/100th of a grade point, they wouldn't let me take the 2nd semester of my sophomore year, so I said, I'll show you. I went down and enlisted in the Marine Corps for 4 years with no obligation, no guarantee, no nothing. Just said, sign me up. And my mother didn't want me to go in the Marine Corps for good reason. And she started to raise Cain a little bit. I didn't find this out till about 10 years ago, but Dad took her aside and said, you have 3 days where you can raise all kinds of hop. You can swear, you can dance, you can scream, you can holler. But when he comes on, you will support his action. Because he's over 18. It's a legal commitment. We can do nothing about it. So from then on, they supported me.
Awesome. Do you have any siblings?
My brother was a Marine. My sister was a medical technician, so she didn't join. My cousins were all Army or Navy. So the family grew up around military service. And if you're going to ask what got me to join the Marine Corps, why did I want that? I remember distinctly seeing a TV ad back in the 60s, when the TV just came out, big, showing a DI slamming a barracks door open, flipping the light on, and kicking the trash can down the aisle, and I wanted to find out if that was true. That's all. I mean, seriously. And the challenge of you're the best.
So what was your job in the military?
Tactical data communications repairman and technician. I had 2 MOSs. Both of them, I was one of the stakeholders in it. They had never been made before, they had never existed before. And I worked on a system part. My unit was called Tactical Data Communication, Computer Communications, TDCC, part of an MTDS network of Marine Corps air control operators and data collection systems that interfaced with the Army Tactical Data Communication Central, Navy Tactical Data Communication Centrals, and the Air Force Air Control System and Network. And the TDCC interfaced all of the disparate languages and tech communications capability so that air control consoles, air controllers could actually see different regions of the world. In fact, I know we covered all of Southeast Asia, from Mongolia down to Australia. We could cover that much tactical data area in a secure, encrypted form over radio communications. And the big fight was who was going to control it. The stories I have say that the Joint Chiefs decided to join them all together so that they could share. And the Air Force was contacted first. They wanted $5 million in 1950 dollars and 5 years to develop it. Joint Chiefs said, no, it's now the Navy's turn. They said $2 million in 2 years. The Army they didn't even consider, and the Marines, they just kind of looked at us and said, you guys don't have anything. My CO, CW3, Chief Warrant Officer 3, worked for the Commandant of the Marine Corps. He went to him and said, I can do it in 6 months and $500,000. 6 months to the day they had a operational test bed, which was, all the equipment was so classified we didn't even know about it. And then I started off in boot, went to electronics school, skipped ITR, so I didn't even do that. Then I went to Minneapolis for a factory school on the computer I was going to repair and maintain, and had 4 months of instruction by the design engineers who built the computer. There was discrete components, resistors, capacitors, ferrite core, 1/8 of an inch in diameter per bit. Where today you work with gigabits, I worked with 32K. And what I'm going to describe of the capability of transmitting will amaze you, and you're wondering why do we need all that memory now. But I learned how to repair, operate, and program computers at the bit level. We had no assemblers, no computer programs to make our programs. I had to write them by hand. And that computer, when it's fully operational, handled the radar, analog and digital information, voice commands, and digital communication between the services in Vietnam. In our air control outfit, I belonged to MAX 4. 27,000 flights a month. Combat tactical actions. Multiple birds, multiple stories, and I had to keep that machine running 24/7. That was my first tour in Vietnam. And that was 67, 68. And then I came back out of that and went to 29 Palms with the Communications and Electronics Battalion and wrote the next level course. I started off to 5977, which is the computer only. We had an analog to digital component, radio component, and repair shops, air conditioning, independent power. The Marine Corps system was transportable anywhere in the world within 24 hours. So we were the first in the world to do that. When I wrote the course, I then helped teach the course to the first crossover officers and electronic and senior NCOs for the operation of that device. There was no staffing for the career in that field. Well, I taught the course and then I went through the course. So I had a little bit of a interesting background. I then went to, that was in 29 Palms, California at C&E Battalion, and it just moved there. And then I went to Santa Ana, Marine Air Control Group 38, which is the East Coast Reservist testing site. Was in transition for about 3 months. Friday afternoon, my CO, who had been my gunny the first tour, comes up to me and says, tomorrow morning, Saturday, the moving truck will be there to pick up your gear at home, because I lived off base, being a senior sergeant. And I lived off base. The truck showed up, took my car and all my personal gear, shipped it home to my parents. Monday morning, he had said, I'd been instructed to show up at the airport with a civilian ticket, in civilian clothes, with civilian luggage, no military luggage. And my ticket said, Saigon. Well, I hop-skipped over to Singapore, Hawaii, Guam, Singapore, overnighted there. When I got off the plane in Singapore, it was, I'm on my own. No instruction, no orders, classified in the pocket, no big envelope, still in civilian clothes. So I get on the next plane to Saigon, land in Saigon, standing on the civilian tarmac at Saigon, Tan Son Nhut. No orders, no nothing, no instruction on who to pick me up, where to go. I knew where I needed to go in country, but I had no authorization to go there. Jeep shows up and says, get in. So I get in, takes me to a hotel, and it's 0600 tomorrow morning. I'm on my own, which is not bad. Next morning I stand there and another Jeep shows up, takes me to the military tarmac. All this civilian clothes. Oh, I had to take civilian clothes with me. I had to have suit and sports outfits, civilian shoes, rain gear, as though I lived back here, as well as all my military clothes. So I stood on the military tarmac in civilian clothes, and all these troops were just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, looking at me like, ooh, what goes on? Another Jeep shows up. He says, get in. I drive me over to the military, the civilian, or military C-130. At which point then they said, get in. So I find myself a comfortable strap seat. And if you've ever ridden in a C-130, we'll leave that stories alone. There's a lot of them. I get off in Da Nang at the airport. Nothing there. Jeep shows up, get in, takes me to Monkey Mountain, which is a peninsula northeast of Da Nang, out in the ocean. to a ARVN base. Turns out it was Air Force. I go up to the gate and they won't let me in. The ARVN doesn't recognize me because I'm in civilian clothes and they can't read my orders. So they finally get somebody who can read. He says, "Oh, Marine, that barracks up there." So I walk in and I get chewed out by some guy, some corporal in the barracks. He said, "Where the hell have you been?" I explained. He said, "Well, you were supposed to be here 3 days ago." I said, "Yeah, the gunnery sergeant that was supposed to be in my place was AWOL drunk. So I got picked up as next qualified to do the job because they had no technicians. I supervised that computer, the analog digital crypter machine, and the radio network, and the operations as a senior sergeant. And an hour later I was on the job on Monkey Mountain. And that was in, I first went over in May of '67, '68, helped build the first operational combat computer network to do this interfacing, and built all the huts and bunkers around all the equipment. Dug a 12 by 12 by 12 grounding hole for the antennas in the rocky soil that the Seabees had leveled off the top of the mountain. Dropped it 50 feet to level it off big enough for us. And filled it with radiators we welded together with strapping, and then ran the grounding straps from the antennas in the huts down to that grounding point. Filled it in with salt, covered it with dirt, packed it down. We put a tube in there so we could refresh the salt and water. So every week or so we'd pour about 50 pounds of salt on this tube, 8-inch tube, and fill it with water to make sure we had a good ground for all that equipment. Because we were up 2,000 feet. And the lightning struck every night. And we had clouds that were lower than us. And like most guys in Vietnam, you kept a raincoat over your bunk because you'd walk in the barracks at night and it'd be raining. It'd be so wet and moist. But I fixed in '67, '68, May through June, and then I went to 29 Palms. Ended up coming back to Vietnam, only I didn't stay at the Marines because they had left in '71. All the Marines were being taken out of Vietnam. They all went east, I went west. And I stayed there from May of '71 through February or March, I can't remember. We moved to Thailand for a short time and then moved to Okinawa, or not Okinawa, Iwakuni, Japan, where my outfit was headquarters. My first tour I was with the Air Control Squadron, and the second tour I was a detachment of 15 guys living on an Air Force base and working on our equipment on an Air Force site where we couldn't talk to the Air Force. We were so classified. We had, jokingly, we had KBC guys behind us. And for people who've been there, they know that KBC is kill before capture. Similar to the code talkers had a escort in their job that if they were going to get caught, the guy had orders to kill him because of the security level we were at. And so I lived there for 18 to 20 months. Had a good tour. We had incidents. We were the safest spot in Vietnam, in Da Nang, and Da Nang was the safest spot in Vietnam. I tried to go on a swift boat ride on a combat outing, or there's so many different names for it. I'm just going to say outing. And they said, no, you're too valuable, you're too knowledgeable, and you're too classified. So then I finished up my tour in Okinawa, or Iwakuni, and then went back to Treasure Island and got discharged, and sat in an airport with a duffel bag in military gear, and a MP walked by and said, kind of looked at me, and he walked around me, and then a dog walker came around me and sniffed me out because they thought I was AWOL. But I had no ID, no driver's license, no means of identifying myself, just my discharge papers. I'm sitting there amongst all these kids that were coming around spitting on you, called me babysitter, and all the treatments that the 73 veterans were getting. And the problem was very simple for me. I didn't deserve what they called me. If I had done it, it'd be a different story, but I didn't. And that pretty much ends my military activities until 2009, when I got back into the military service group. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't tell them I was a Marine until one day out at the village out at 180th and Center. No, 168th and Center. And they had a band concert by the Omaha Symphony, and they played the military hymns. And they said, stand up, and that's the first time in 50 years I ever acknowledged publicly that I was a Marine. A good friend from church came up to me right at the end of it and said, I didn't know you were a Marine, welcome home. The first time I ever mentioned it to anybody or talked with them, because I had been trained, one, don't talk about your work. You can't even tell my dad, who at that time was briefing the Joint Chiefs of Staff as a procurement agent. So I couldn't even tell him, but he knew what I was doing. He had contacts. Found this out later. So that pretty much covered my military in a 50,000-foot view. Oh, from that effort from Vietnam, I ended up with, I've got a VA benefit rating of 280 points. I don't know, you get credit for 100 because that's the max they can benefit. Parkinson's, prostate cancer, diabetes, prelim, some say, otherwise full diabetes.
Were you exposed to any chemicals or anything like that while you were over at Nome?
We lived, my first tour in 67, 68, we drove through jungle every day. And yes, we did get sprayed. I think it's a laughing thing that the Air Force said, Agent Orange is stopped by the fence. That's why the Air Force in Thailand couldn't get benefits for heaven knows how many years, because the VA said if you didn't travel in town as a fireman or MP, AP, you wouldn't get any benefit for Agent Orange. They just this last week with the PACT Act released that. Finally they're going to get justice. But yes, I was sprayed. Yes, I crawled through the jungle. Yes, I stood there and watched it. I'm presumptive Agent Orange. and I've had a couple accidents in the military. I got hit by a deuce-and-a-half truck at 30 miles an hour, thrown 100 feet. Landed on my head, paralyzed from the mid-thorax down for what I thought was 8 hours. My CO said, nah, we think it was a day or two. And to this day, I'm still suffering from that. Lumbar damage to me, to the VA. It says, no, that's just a condition that came about because you're old. And I can't find the incident in the dailies or the records of the Air Force site or the Marine Corps because we were so classified. We did a lot of the group next to us was the Air Sea Rescue Air Force, and they did a lot of work with Air America. No one can leave it at that. If you know what Air America is in Vietnam. So we worked in a lot of different areas. One of the best times we ever had in Vietnam, I can honestly say, was sitting on Friday night hot dog and popcorn and beer night at the Air Force NCO Club, watching bombing and rocket attacks in Hanoi and the bay out there. The jet planes, they bring in the videos and tapes, movies from that, and we'd be watching them, and you could see the wire-guided rockets going down, and there'd be 20 sampans down there, so we'd quick make a 3-second bet on which sampan that rocket was going to hit. Then we had to pay up, and by that time another one. So we'd sit there drinking beer, eating hot dogs, and watching things that, at that time, and they now admit it, but at that time, we never attacked anybody in Hanoi Harbor. We never bombed them. And we all know now different. So we had a lot of fun. Another time in my second tour, a Marine from the consulate came up. We were the only Marines around, and we had a high enough security clearance, higher than him. He says, we need a bartender down there. Did anybody bring civilian clothes? Me. So I get dressed, and they pick me up, take me down there, and say, here's your bartending job. Luckily I had done it before, so I knew a little bit about it. He said, you get your usual set of drinks, but then if you get one from this bartender or this waiter, he says he wants iced tea. See all these teacups and saucers over here? Different colors, different sizes, different shapes. Iced tea is this one, and you fill it with gin and tonic. If you ask for bourbon or water, it's a coffee mug, because it looks a little bit like coffee. And I looked at him and I said, you're kidding. He said, no, a lot of the attendees at this consular evening are not allowed to drink. So they carry coffee cups and mugs around. That night, and I can now say it, I watched American generals, American consular people, France, Germany, everybody had a consulate in Da Nang were attending, including the Catholic archbishops and cardinals, the local religious leaders at the national South Vietnam, ARVN troops and generals, North Korean officers and consular officials, Viet Cong leaders who were identified to me because they said, see, that lady over there, don't look at her, but out of the corner of your eye, watch her. The most Eurasian lady you will ever see. She will come over and attempt to talk to you. Don't do it. Her husband, a Viet Cong leader, will have you killed within 24 hours for trying to encroach upon his woman. So I had to be very careful. I came out of that war, out of the Vietnam War, with a whole different aspect of the politics, and couldn't say a word. So when people say, what do you think of Vietnam? Rainy, dusty, dirty, some of the great people and some of the worst people. Beyond that, let's leave it.
Do you have any battle buddies you still talk to or that you hung out with for a while after you got out and while you were in?
No. I do now, one, and some of my MAX outfits, Marine Air Control Squadron. I've been attending their reunions for about 5 years. But at my first reunion I went to, because they had not done it for about 20 or 30 years, Squadron MAX 4 used to get together every year. People died off. So then they combined all the air control squadrons in the Marine Corps, which are 9 of them, MAX 1 through MAX 9. So they hold a MAX reunion someplace in the U.S., Quantico, San Diego, Beaufort, every year, except 2020, we couldn't. But my first one, I'm in there talking to some woman Marine gunnery sergeant, blathering like I knew what I was talking about Marine Corps history. And she was very polite, very nice, listened to me, didn't say a word. And I mentioned Monkey Mountain. And the voice comes over my shoulder, "Did somebody say Monkey Mountain?" And I turn around, here's one of my buds that served me my second tour. He worked for me for a year. And we looked at each other and immediately, you know what's going on. His Marine wife, who he met when he went to sea, when he went to sea in the battalion as an instructor, no maintenance, I'm sorry, came out, and we all got together, my wife and I, and both of them, we sat there and looked at each other and said, "Are you still here?" "Yes." Out of 400 Marines at that reunion in Quantico at the Marine Corps Museum banquet we held at the museum, there was 8 of us from Vietnam. And they never called any of us up to stand up. They called up all the newer groups and designations, and they redesignated the TDCC to Tactical Data Systems. And they were identifying them, had them stand up, they got a round of applause. I kind of groused about they didn't recognize us as TDCC. Well, you're part of TDS. I had never heard that until that moment. And a little bit later, the one-star general nudges the corporal leader of the banquet. He stands up and says, "With all the Monkey Mountaineers, stand up." 8 of us stood up. Everybody went. Then one young Marine stood up and started applauding, and 400 Marines stood up for 10 minutes. We were the guys who set the standard for them. Our equipment had a 99.99% uptime in a month, and 99.98% in 1 month. In 3 months, 99% uptime. To this day, nobody's been able to do it, even with the modern equipment. We kept that site going. But that was the first time in 50 years, I think it was 50, 73 to 16, 15, yeah, 53 years, anybody ever acknowledged us as being valuable. once I stood up at that concert, I started doing some research on the computer and found out that there's a history of the 1st Marine Air Wing, which was the unit we worked under in Vietnam. One lieutenant colonel historian did a history of the 1st Marine Air Wing in Vietnam. The 5th paragraph, I'll try and quote it as best I can. 5th Chief Warrant Officer 3 Maserati and his 15-man detail were the most crucial item in the success of the Marine Air War in Vietnam. In 400 pages, no other unit is named by name or person named by name except us. Never knew the impact we had until I read that. And it was like, we did something. To this day, I can't find any of the other guys in my outfit. We all were so well trained to stay undercover, out of sight. And except for my bud from the 1st. We get together now 5 years. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we just spent 4 days with them in Michigan City, Indiana, Chesterton, Indiana, antiquing. And so we're just still getting together this year. We're going back in September to pick up the rest of the concrete benches that we bought from them. And then next year we've got another reunion we're planning on, so sorry to break down.
No, that's perfectly fine.
I know, you've got the napkins just in case. Sorry my voice goes low. If I start to get gravelly or it gets too low, just ask me to speak up. I'll do my best. That's one of the symptoms. That's one of the symptoms of Parkinson's. Besides the shakes, the physical conditions, emotional and mental problems you go through. So, and then one of the biggest things that helps me right now is the DAV, the Marine Corps League, the VFW, the VVA, the 14A that I'm a member of. And that's something that most people, even today, American Legion used to have a unit in it called 14A. It was a World War I group of, the membership had to have ridden in French trains during World War I. And their rating on the trains were 40, each car held either 40 men or 8 horses. And that's where the name of the outfit came from, 14A. My grandfather was a charter member of the 14A in Davenport, Iowa. So I mentioned that and they all went, yes sir. And I'm still not used to being called sir by a bunch of Marines. I work with the Marine Corps League, past commandant of this detachment. Helped get the monument up at Memorial Park in Omaha for the Marine Corps, 8-foot EGA, which is our emblem. Concrete with a complete memorial site up there. It's the most simple one, but a lot of people have come up and said, that means something. We've had a couple of officers and a couple of enlisted guys, senior master sergeants, first sergeants, who asked us for permission to get promoted on that site. We've got name bricks that anybody can use, sign up and put a Marine down for. In fact, when we had the Kuwait incident, lost 13, we put in 13 bricks because one of the guys was local. His name was at the top and the rest of them were all below him in the solid block. The family didn't know we were doing it till we invited them for the setting. And the manufacturer of the stones, when they found out about it, donated all the labor and shipping of all those paving bricks. So it was sort of a surprise for everybody, but everybody stepped up to the task. That was what, $1,300 they donated. But the DAV here and the Marine Corps League are my two majors at the moment that I participate in. So, how much more can I spill? I've got a lot of history and a lot of stories, but
Let me see if there's anything I can.
particular elsewhere. I covered a lot of territory there in that time. As a note, I made sergeant in 13 months.
That's quick.
I was a corporal in 8, and when I got to Vietnam, I was still a corporal. Walked into the detachment office, and the warrant officer, Maserati, told me I'm getting you promoted to sergeant. But this isn't because you earned it as a Marine. It says we were trying to protect you from having mess duty and guard duty. So when I'm around Marines who have been in real combat and earned that, I earned it, but I just don't feel like I rate the same as them.
You do, just in a different way.
I understand the different way, but it's still, I hold them up higher on the respect list than me. My frustration is that I was never able to be a combat Marine. I asked for it many times. There was no other job in the Marine Corps I could be transferred to by protected job, because I was so well trained, so knowledgeable, and so specialized. And I don't know why I got the Navy Marine Corps Commendation. I can't find it in my records.
You can't find why, or you can't find it that you
I can't find a record of me being awarded it. I can't find a record of when they issued it. I can't find the story behind it, the paperwork.
Could it possibly be under top secret like the rest of your missions?
Yep. You asked for what campaigns I was in on the record. You notice I left it blank. This comes out of TWS, Together We Serve. And this is a cut down version of my shadow box of what information I've entered. Combat and non-combat operations. I was in 5 of them because of the length of my tour. Everything from Vietnam War, counteroffensive phase 3, Tet counteroffensive. I watched Tet from the Monkey Mountain, saw Da Nang Air Base, saw the line of fire with the crisscross red-green tracers move back and forth across the airfield. Drinking a beer, watching that happen with a bunch of guys, Air Force and Marine. And then we saw Puff come in and take out the green side because we used pink. So we watched it. Vietnam War consolidation campaign. My memory's gone, so that's why I had this all printed up.
Oh, no problem.
one of the benefits of the Marine Corps, I say, is that I got a $250,000 education out of the Marine Corps in 1966 dollars. I came out qualified to be a first class. There was a rating of the highest licensed, federally licensed electronics, electrical repairman and installer. I was licensed to repair, maintain, and certify any electronic device in the United States. Can you separate those two?
Yes, sir. Maybe. That is only one.
Oh, there it is, okay.
That's all right.
Wasn't my fault afterwards. Vietnam War counteroffensive phase 7, Vietnam ceasefire campaign, Operation Linebacker, Vietnam veteran ceasefire campaign, and Operation Linebacker 2 are the ones that are rated that I can find. On my DD-214 for the first year, I show our detachment, which I get credit for campaigns and actions, 5 pages, double-sided, of campaigns, 25 per page. So almost every action in Vietnam I can put down as campaigns that I have participated in. Back in the background, but we enabled combat, air sorties to be better controlled. Right now the progression technology steps for what we started with was just small computers. We are now the system we designed, the core design is still used by the Air Force on their command and control flights. It's now on a little chip this big. And it is one of the major tactical data communications, allowing generals to talk to corporals out in the field in actions, and has been done starting with the Gulf War forward. The same physical equipment, the next generation. We went from a TYQ-3 to a YUK-7, was used in the first Gulf War. That was 25 years after Vietnam. So we worked on what I helped maintain and get working was still better than what FAA can do today. So I'm proud of my work, but it's self-contained. I try and talk to other people about what I did. Everybody goes. Because they don't understand, they can't conceive of what we did. One of the biggest gifts we had in my second tour was an HP 25 calculator. The first digital chip calculator. It was this big by this, by this. Small, handheld, and 15 of us sat down, were looking at it, playing with it. Broke it the first day because we took it beyond its capabilities by just what we knew. Then we started planning Dick Tracy watches, which we now have. Cell phones we talked about planning, and that was in 71 to 73. The Air Force tried to take advantage of it by getting us in poker games. We won too much. They also tried to beat us in bridge. At a tenth of a cent or half a cent a point, we'd beat them. And people say, well, that's not much. I said, no, when you got 7,000 points, it gets up to a little bit of cash.
Yeah.
So we challenged the Air Force. Friendly. We drank with them too much. I've been rehearsing this for about 2 days.
You're doing awesome.
Any questions, Tom?
I would like to know, what would you like people to know about your story?
One, that we existed. 2, understand the relationship to the modern world. Understand that what it took to do what we did back then. Everybody thinks that today has just kind of appeared. The MTDS system started in 1953 in Korea. The whole MTDS system in MAX 4 started off in MAX 7 in Korea, and their communication system was radios, and they had plexiglass writers who wrote backhanded on the back of a plexi board, and that's how they knew where the airplanes were in Korea. And I know that for a fact because when I joined the Marine Corps League, I sat down next to a retired gunnery sergeant, a retired fire captain, EMT, here in Omaha, and I started describing what I just told you in a real short, cryptic form. He looked at me and said, "You were in MAX 4? He said, "I was in MAX 7 in Korea." And he was on the plexiglass writers. So when we replaced those with computer screens, it was like, he looked at me and says, "I know what you did, I know how you did it, and thank you." And I'm sitting there saying, how can you go and be that long and never know anybody, and all of a sudden you sit down, you're talking to somebody who understands what I did? That would be the best thing I could say about people. There's a lot more to what we did. We expanded into other areas of communication, digital, which surprised a lot of people. And it's hard history to find. First, you got to know how to get into military history files. 2, you got to know the phrasing that they use, the thoughts and everything. And nobody does that. There's a Texas university, and I can't think of it, has the Vietnam records for all of the paperwork. The dailies, the monthlies.
Is it AMN? Or A...
Texas A&M.
Yeah.
They have a huge library down there on the web. But you got to know how to translate military into civilian language. I also have to know how to do research on the computer, research in your mind, research in history, keeping in the language changes and the methodology changes to know what to look for. And unfortunately, this is a comment on today. People don't like to do that. So when I come around here, I enjoy working with the DAV because I get to meet veterans from all generations. And 99% of them are really great people. And even the ones that are problematic, they come around with patience and help and support. And that's why I like the DAV. Does that kind of answer you, give you a guideline on your question?
Can you, what's your best story about being a DAV rep?
under the guideline that I have to keep names and details out of it because of the DAV legal restrictions in working with personal histories. I would say yesterday was everyone's best. They're all great. Especially hearing the stories of what other guys, other DAV members have done to help veterans. A Vietnam veteran and his daughter came in. He had Parkinson's, and I was just an observer sitting watching, and the DAV rep was going through the paperwork, and it turned out to be not complex, but there's a question even the National Service Officer couldn't find in the records. Then we went on to another subject and got him filled out with his paperwork. While we were finishing up, I looked at him, at the veteran. He was a Vietnam guy, Agent Orange, Parkinson's, bad. And I looked at him and I said, at his daughter and said, "Have you had his eyes checked?" She said, "Why?" "He's already got glasses, but he won't wear them." I said, "Well, Parkinson's impacts it, and you might be able to get some benefits out of the VA to get that." Oh. Also, I watched him sign his signature. And for a Parkinson's patient, that is one of the most embarrassing times. Well, besides when you eat or have to go to the bathroom. But signing your signature is almost near impossible. And I couldn't because I was creeping real small. And the VA got me in touch with an occupational therapist. And I said I wanted to read, so they sent me to a low vision clinic here in Omaha, world renowned. The doctor spent 2.5 hours with me before he started to itemize things that he could do for me. We started working with one of his technicians. This is an explanation of why I was helping him. And after a couple sessions, she said, "Here, try this." Flipped a little piece of cardboard about 1.5 inches, 2 inches long by 1 inch high, with a rectangle cut out of the middle. She said, "Here, put it down over where you want to write something." Put it down there, and I just, 20 years ago, I wrote my signature like that. Just went straight across with not a stop, not a problem, and a smile on my face. So I wanted to share that with him, and I told him, and he's, as best he could, because we have what they call facial drop. There's no face, no emotion. And he looked at me, and his arms started shaking faster, and I read that. Yeah, he's interested. And I said, "You just go ask for that little piece of paper or make one." The fact that I could add to his help in a little way while we were helping him with the VA and everything else, slide something in and tell him, "You're okay, here's your best thought." I feel pretty good about that.
It's always good to help others.
Yeah. And I've been told by my counselors that when I'm one of those that when I help others, I help me. You're the same. And to admit that I need help, one of the first things that got me into the VA was somebody said, "Go down and register." I got on the elevator in the hospital, not the mains, the side ones, and I got on and I looked at the signs they have posted there. It's something I tell vets when they come into the DAV. That sign was the military guy just standing there. The only words other than VA registered at the bottom was it said it takes more courage to ask for help. No other words. And my first try at getting help retired gunnery sergeant, looked at me and he says, "Do you trust me to help you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Do you trust anybody?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, goodbye." And I looked at him and I said, "Oh?" He said, "If you can't trust me to help you, it won't do me any good to spend the time with you because you're just going to yeah, and walk out the door. When you're ready, you'll come back." 2.5 years later, I met my, well, not my current one, but the one I've been working with the most. And I finally said, yes, I'm going to trust him. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Next to this. This is not easy. Because I want to present the best presentation of my life. But I have no reinforcement that it's going to be good. That it'll mean something to somebody, at least one.
It means something to me.
Well, thank you. So when I try and explain to them why I'm a Marine, as well as a computer geek, that's a contradiction in terms. Big one, huge. And people look at me like, why don't you use computers? And I don't. I hardened my phone so hard that professional crypto people have tried to get into it. They can't get in. I build my own computers and everybody says, well, why aren't you on Facebook? Why aren't you on Twitter? Why aren't you on Instagram? Why aren't you on Messenger? I says, I'm not going to give you my life blindly where everybody else can break into you because you don't treat the information as safely as I do. He said, well, then why do you work in the field? I can fix any computer in the world, any program, help anybody do something on the computer, but I have no need for one. And I always leave them with figuring out that they know more than I do, and they feel good. When I worked at my civilian job, the longest, about the last 6 years, I worked with a gentleman. He was assigned to me to document my procedures because nobody knew what I did. Nobody knew how I got it done. I ran was responsible for 25% of the computing power for a Fortune 500 company. And everybody looked at me like, how can you do all that and still be a customer support person and get people done doing things on the computer? And he was assigned, and we got to talk, and I found out he was actually there to document me so they could replace me. Politically, I was in a tough position. My department didn't support me, but the users did. They demanded that I couldn't be fired. Dotted line networking, for those into org chart or organizational theory, dotted line network was stronger than a solid line. Then one day we were working with somebody, and we came out of the session. He would go with me on my customer calls, and I handled about 5 to 10 of those a day. And we were talking, he said, why do they oppose you? Why do they fight you so hard? So we spent a year studying it. We finally came down with a routine. Funny as all get out, to me. I would get a call for a problem that somebody's having with the program. I'd walk in and in 30 seconds be able to figure out what the problem was and have a solution. And I would say, okay, I'm ready. And I'd tell them, you go back to here. Yeah, that's where I started it. But it doesn't work from there on. And I said, well, do this. And I give them a keystroke by keystroke thought process to do it. And I said, do you understand that? I'll do it again. And then the customer would do it, and it would fail. Well, it didn't work. How are you gonna fix that? I do it again. They said, I don't understand how you can do it. Well, Bros, and I can use his name, would say, Mike, let me try. He would sit down, do the process to fix it. The person behind him would look at him and say, I got it now. They would repeat it. They turned around, looked at me and said, Mike, you better let Bros do all your troubleshooting from now on. What we had done is agreed that he would memorize everything I did and say and repeat it verbatim. We finally figured out that my knowledge level and my abilities to repair stuff was so high above them that they were intimidated, and they would make very small mistakes that I could catch. When I tried to explain it to them, they wouldn't understand. But Bros, they knew, was not a computer person. And when he sat down and did it, they trusted him over me. And that's what happened in the Marine Corps. I would fix things that other people would come up and say, what? Had an incident on Monkey Mountain, my second tour, where we'd been having some problems on interfacing this one box, crucial crypto level work, and it wouldn't stabilize. I was out playing with it, walked in the office, I got it fixed. We had a factory rep who was their guru, and another factory rep for the other side of the equipment, two disparate pieces of equipment. They looked at me and they said, you got it fixed where? And I told them. They were out the door, wrote it up and sent it back to the factory. My CEO says, where is this? I went through 5 pages of schematics saying this, 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 and this, and this. And this happened weekly. And so when we found out with Bros that that's what was happening, we'd walk out of a customer session laughing, because I had found the problem, but it taught me that it takes a different language for people who don't understand the level that I work at, and how this, if somebody put it, this empty space between my ears functions. And that was one of my big problems in Vietnam, working on the equipment. Didn't stop when I got out either. Got my college degree after I got out, went back to school. I had been 1.5 years in school before and came out with a 1.99 grade point. When I transferred .8 grad transfer points from my second college tour, and I ended up with a 3.5 in the 4 years that I graduated. Graduated with a 2.95 because they had to add in that .8. The Marine Corps gave me stability, knowledge, some common sense, which is still up for debate, and how to study and how to learn. I took a course, they sent me to a course before I taught the officers and crossover people to a Naval Class A 8-week instructor's course. Got me 17 teaching hours of credit for the college. But I learned course preparation, course presentation, and testing theory on how to write a test as a teaching tool, not an exam or a leveling tool. And then I took psychology courses in college on communication and made a big difference. I got to apply what I learned in the Marine Corps.
That's awesome.
I don't know why you think so, but thank you. To me, it's just, so I did this. And people say, what? Oh, okay, just go away. I have a pastor that, when my wife has problems on her cell phone, he'll run over and correct her. I know how to fix it. But I've learned not to interfere with his image that he knows more than me. This is common. You don't believe it. And I've talked to a lot of people in the DAV chapter here who are in the same boat. They have such high intelligent knowledge levels and abilities, but they can't use them. And that's a lot of problem with the military. When they come out of the military, they have skill sets that are transferable, but it's hard to translate to help the transferability.
Well, thank you for sharing your story on tape. We will stop the interview.
How long did this take?
15 minutes.